Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Sisser, Executive Director of Creative Ohio, and you are joining us today for our CoLab Quarterly Professional Development webinar series. This month, we're talking about creating a culture of advocacy at your arts organization. Creative Ohio is the collective statewide voice for Ohio's creative sector. We're driven by over 130 member organizations, and we provide leadership, advocacy, and support to strengthen and enhance Ohio through arts, culture, and creativity. In addition to our year-round legislative advocacy on behalf of our members, this series is just one way in which we're trying to bring greater connectivity and awareness to the creative sector. We also have monthly connecting point calls with executive leaders from our member organizations, our annual Champion Advocacy Awards, which will take place October 16th in Cincinnati this year, which we're really excited about, and a regular newsletter providing the most current public policy updates affecting our sector every month. We're also helping to lead a statewide, nonpartisan Get Out the Vote initiative this election cycle called Arts Vote Ohio. If you're a member of Creative Ohio, thank you for your ongoing support. And if you're not, we'd love for you to consider joining us. You can learn more about membership at creativeoh.org. We have a great panel with us today to discuss arts advocacy and to share some insight from their collective decades of experience doing this work. And I won't embarrass them by telling you just how many decades that includes, but it's a lot. A couple of housekeeping comments, though, before we get started today. This program is being recorded, and a link will be shared with you after today's program to access that recording, as well as today's slides and talking points, including Randy Cohen's top 10 reasons to support the arts in Ohio. We'll have time for questions today, and as questions might come to you throughout today's program, please feel free to put them in the chat, and then I'll field them at the end of the program for our panelists. I'd like to kick things off today by lending a bit more context to the idea of creating a culture of advocacy. Prior to leading Creative Ohio, I served as the executive director of a mid-sized cultural institution in Ohio for more than 10 years. In much of the executive and continuing education training that I had as a nonprofit leader, I was encouraged to create a culture of philanthropy within my organization. As you all know, an organization's culture dramatically affects its effectiveness. Culture is pervasive. It affects all areas of the organization, including fundraising. Corporate culture refers to the personality of an organization and the way your staff and your stakeholders interact and behave. Your nonprofit should embrace fundraising as an implicit part of its mission. It can't be siloed to the development staff alone. Everyone within your organization should understand the importance of fundraising and be able to articulate your case for support as an ambassador of your nonprofit. And that, in summary, is a culture of philanthropy. But despite many similarities between fundraising and advocacy, as a nonprofit leader, I never heard this concept extended to advocacy work. In fact, for most of my tenure as a nonprofit leader, I actually didn't think that I could do advocacy work. With a budget of less than $1 million, we had never directly engaged with a lobbyist, and we rarely, if ever, sought out public funding opportunities. Even as I better understood advocacy work, as I became more experienced as a leader, I still treated it as an afterthought because I thought, or I knew that, like most nonprofit leaders and directors, I was usually having to react to small fires with a limited staff and limited resources, and it wasn't a priority for me. My exposure to good advocacy developed as I became more involved through board service with state and national organizations. I know now that not only did I miss funding opportunities for my organization, but in my early years as an executive director, I missed out on developing key relationships with elected officials that could have been so very valuable as I continued on with that work. So the main takeaways, in my perspective, from today's program for you should be, and Jill, if you could switch to the next slide for me. Number one, anyone can engage in advocacy work. And I can't see his face, but I imagine our lobbyist might be grimacing. Because yes, anyone can engage in advocacy work. That doesn't necessarily mean everybody should engage in advocacy work or can do it well. But anyone can do this work. And no matter the size of your organization, whether you are the only full-time staff member, you're a volunteer, or you have a multi-person development staff in your organization, even with a dedicated government affairs person, your arts organization should be engaging in this work at some level. Number two, advocacy should not be an afterthought. There are some simple steps that you can take that we're going to share with you today to make advocacy a part of the work you're already doing, to make sure that everyone on your team has a basic understanding of this process. And we're even going to outline a grassroots advocacy model that one of our Ohio arts organization is using that you might be able to replicate in your own organization. And number three, making the case for the art broadly takes all of us. We are an industry that frequently finds itself having to defend and justify public investment, unfortunately. So it behooves us all to understand the basic talking points for supporting the arts, to be able to share them with others, and to engage in arts advocacy as a sector, above and beyond advocating for our individual institutions, which is so very important. So perhaps the first step in becoming an advocate is in educating yourself, not only on the legislative process, which Bob Klaffky is going to share a little bit more on that later on, but also on the opportunities for and the structure of public funding for arts and culture in this country and in the state of Ohio. And Jill, if you could change to the next slide for me. So I'm going to show this graphic, which I've created, and it's somewhat incomplete. I haven't found this anywhere else, so I just went ahead and made this. And again, you'll have access to these slides after the program. But essentially, we have opportunities for funding for arts and culture at the federal, state, and frequently at the local level. There are opportunities for you to advocate at all three of those levels of government. At the federal level, Randy Cohen's organization, Americans for the Arts, is the leading advocacy organization supporting federal funding for arts and culture. So in addition to federal funding for the arts that might come through appropriations, certain initiatives, like with the Department of Defense or education, the two primary buckets of federal dollars going to arts and culture are through the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. And you can see on this graphic where we landed with fiscal year 24 appropriations to both of those entities. At the state level, we have the Ohio Arts Council, which is our state arts agency, and it receives some funding directly from the NEA, but it also receives a significant appropriation in the state operating budget every other year, of which most of that they're re-granting to arts organizations throughout the state. We also have the state capital budget process, which is not illustrated on this diagram, but that provides additional opportunities for funding for individual organizations. And for our smaller and mid-sized organizations, if you're not engaging in the capital budget process now, I think that's an area where you should be looking. And I think Bob might have touched on that a little bit as well. We also have at the state level, Ohio Humanities, which is the state-based partner for the National Endowment for the Humanities. They receive money from the NEA, which is re-granted to cultural institutions throughout Ohio for project-based support. Unfortunately, the Ohio Humanities does not receive state-level funding at this time. So their funding, their re-granting is restricted specifically to project-based, whereas the Ohio Arts Council grants both operating and project-based support. And finally, at the local level, every county or municipality in Ohio, of course, is going to be different, but we have several different mechanisms in our state and organizations that provide public support at the local level to arts and cultural organizations. So a couple of examples. In Columbus, we have a ticketing fee that goes directly back to arts and culture. Those funds are re-granted out by the Greater Columbus Arts Council. Last year, the Greater Columbus Arts Council re-granted directly to arts organizations and individual artists more than $16 million. So it's a significant infusion of public support at the local level. In Cuyahoga County, in our Cleveland area, we also have a very unique situation, still unique in Ohio, and as far as I know, may still be unique in the nation, and that we have an excise tax on tobacco sales that go directly to support arts and culture. Both of those situations have generated millions of dollars in support for individual organizations and individual artists, and both required and continue to require significant advocacy efforts to make sure that they are understood by elected officials, supported by the community, and in some cases renewed and ballot initiatives. So that was a quick crash course in public funding for the arts in Ohio and in the nation. But again, that diagram is going to be available to you after this. And now I'm going to turn things over to our first guest, Randy Cohen, to discuss arts advocacy at the federal level and making the case for the arts broadly. You can read Randy's full bio on our website, but throughout the country, Randy is better known as the Arts Info Guy, or as I like to call him, the Arts Data Guru. He's played a significant role in federal arts advocacy for more than 30 years. He's the VP of Research at Americans for the Arts. He most recently led the Arts and Economic Prosperity 6th study for AFTA, and he travels the nation year-round to share with others how and why we should support the arts. Randy?
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for your great leadership, not just in Ohio, but across the country as well. It's a important part of a big national team. And great to see so many familiar faces. We're going to talk about really, building the habit of advocacy. And if you believe, like I do, that everybody in our communities in Ohio, across the country, should have the opportunity to participate, engage in the arts, that every child's receiving a quality arts education, we got a job to do. We got to get out there and make the case. Frankly, I think it's the most important thing we can be doing in this country. We're on the right side of what needs to be done. So it's not like we're pushing some kind of crazy idea out there. I mean, this is really how to make our communities healthier, stronger. And so to be advocates, we need a quiver full of case-making arrows, and we've got to know when to deploy them. And so we're going to talk about that as well as some advocacy strategies. So maybe just jump to the next slide, please. There's a lot of ways to think about advocacy. I like to keep it simple. I break it down to 3 questions, and I'm going to use this to frame my brief remarks today. What's the message? Who gets the message? And who delivers the message? And if we just, keep those 3 questions in mind as we go along, we'll be able to champion some ideas with community leaders, with elected leaders. And I'll just mention now my golden rule of advocacy: no numbers without a story, no stories without a number. We're the arts, right? We got lots of stories. But the amazing thing is now over the years, there's this growing body of research that underscores all those benefits, whether it's the value of the arts to a child, to the economy, to community well-being. And so to give you some resources real quick, next one, Jill. What's the message? And you heard Sarah mention it. Our most popular download by like a factor of 5, 10 reasons to support the arts. And we customize one for Ohio. This is a 1-pager. Put this in your pocket, never take it out. It's just so easy to use, and you can see, all the different benefits that the arts bring to a community, from the fundamental intrinsic benefits to the economic, to arts in the military, to mental health, healthcare. And you'll notice when you go online and when you click each of these headers, like arts unify communities or, arts strengthen the economy, it's going to take you to more information as well. So there's a great, those are pithy talking points, but there's more information about that. So if you want to, feel like you're more knowledgeable about everything. So that's a great resource, and again, that'll be going up on Creative Ohio's website, and probably within a day or something like that. There's another resource that I want to tell you about on the next slide, and that is our Arts Impact Explorer, what I like to just think of as the pinwheel. And this actually is a lot of fun, and you can see the link to it down there at the bottom. This has 29 different issues. And so, you'll pick an issue. And so imagine, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, the mayor gives you a call. Hey, I want to talk about arts and the environment or something. And you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I got that. I'll be there. Oh, where do I find some information about that? Go to americansforthearts.org/explorer. And when you click on any of these, the whole thing spins around. This is actually fun. I really do call it a pinwheel, but you click on an issue or a topic area, it'll give you a brief description of what it is. You can click in the middle again. Here's some case studies. Here's some research. Here's a 4-page resource document. Here's, some examples of how it's being done. We're updating this all the time. And again, this is just a tool that's freely available. And honestly, it's like browsing in your favorite store. Just go to this and you click it and it spins around, and there's all these ideas and categories you just never even thought of. And so it's just another great resource that's there. And both of these, all of this will work on your phone as well, because let's face it, sometimes you might be standing out a legislator's office and somebody comes out walking and say, yeah, they want to talk about mental health. Okay, let me get on that right away. So okay, so someone had trouble finding the link. I'll make sure that the link works: www.americansforthearts.org. So I'll do that while the next speakers are doing. I'll just pop it in. Okay, so that's a little bit about the content. Now, in some places to find broad amounts of it. So thank you, Gina. So next slide. I am going to talk just real quickly about a couple of case making points and sort of go from the general to the specific. You know, if I were some extraterrestrial from outer space here to advocate for the arts, you know, take me to your leader. Oh yeah, and give me one talking point. I'd make it an economic talking point because you know when you talk to most legislators and ask them their three priorities, they'll tell you jobs, jobs, and jobs. So you know, let's just talk real quick a couple examples of you know how you can just start talking about arts and jobs. The Bureau of Economic Analysis at the Department of Commerce, top economics shop on the planet, they do a study every year. It's called the Arts and Cultural Production Satellite Account. And what they do is they look at the entire US economy. So nonprofit, commercial, Hollywood motion pictures, publishing, university drama department, any dollar in the US economy that they can find that's an arts dollar, they pluck it out. In 2022, arts and culture in the United States was a 1.1 trillion with a T dollar industry in this country, 4.3% of the nation's economy. Now, what's great is wonderful, but you know, how about something closer to home? And now they do these statewide versions of this as well. And so in 2022, you could see in Ohio, $25 billion industry, 3% of the state's economy. That's over 157,000 jobs right there in Ohio. Is that a lot or a little? Well, let's put some context to it. Arts and culture is bigger than utilities. It's bigger than education. It's bigger than agriculture in Ohio. So when you're in Columbus and you know you're talking to your legislators and they're like, well, you know, we love the arts, but we got to focus on business. Arts are business. So really powerful numbers there that make the case and demonstrate the economic benefits of the arts. Now, next slide, please. Obviously, the closer you can get to home about anything, you know, the more impactful the data are going to be in your case making. So you heard Sarah mention, we just published Arts and Economic Prosperity 6, which is a national economic impact study of arts, nonprofit arts organizations and their audiences. And so we got Dory and some of our Ohio partners in there. This was a big national study. We published it last October, 373 communities across the country. In this one, we looked only at the nonprofit arts and culture sector and the event-related spending by their audiences. So arts organizations are businesses. We employ people locally. We purchase goods and services from other businesses in the community. We're members of the Chamber of Commerce, and you know we drive tourism. Arts organizations are good business citizens, and that is a story. That is our story, and we have to remember to tell that one because we support industries, all kinds of them, right? You know, if we've got a facility, sure, we may have curators and performers, but we've got electricians and plumbers and security staff and marketing and box office people. We pay, you know, it's hot now. What's the utility bill for some of our institutions? Crazy, right? We do all of that. Unlike most industries, when attendees go to an arts event, we spend a lot of money related to that arts event. Think of the last time you went and saw a performance or an exhibition. Maybe you had, you know, paid for parking and had dinner and went out for dessert afterwards and came home and double the cost of the evening on babysitting. Lots of economic activity. We did 224,000 audience surveys. The typical attendee to an arts event spends $38.46 per person per event, not including the cost of admission. And you can go to our website down there at the bottom, ap6.americansforthearts.org, and you can read all about this study. But you'll also find the Arts and Economic Prosperity Calculator so you can estimate your organization's economic impact. You only need two numbers, your total expenditures and your total attendance. You click on the calculator, it's on the upper right side of the page when you go to this link, put in those two numbers, hit calculate, your economic activity and economic impact will populate in the boxes below. So you can have your own data right there. Let's see, next slide, please. I kept pushing the button, nothing happened. Now, economic is obviously one way to talk about the arts. I love this flip side of the conversation as well, which you also find on the website. What the arts mean to people. 72% of the American population say the arts provide opportunities for shared experiences with people of different age, race, faith, ethnicity. The arts bring our communities together. They unify communities. 63% of the population say the arts help me understand other cultures in my community. 80% of the population, arts and culture, it's a source of pride and community identity. And similar percentage, I'd feel a sense of loss if that were no longer available in my community. So there's lots of really powerful data. A lot of that's on your 10 reasons, and you can get deeper into it on the with the website there. Next slide, please. So so what's the message? Who gets the message? So that's the next one. We talked about a bunch of messages. Who gets the message? And that's where we have to do a little bit of our research. Who are those decision makers and authorizers in our environment? Is it a legislative committee? Is it the mayor? Is it a county council person, city council person, or a highest, foundation, somebody like that? Who are your legislators? You may know all that, but here's an easy way to find out. Go to the Arts Action Fund, and actually, you should just join the Arts Action Fund. It's free, and it's as easy as falling off a log. You go to Arts Action Fund, it'll give you a prompt to put in your zip code. You hit Find Your Legislators there, and that box on the right, halfway down, and it'll give you your state and federal legislators. And it's like, oh, it's time to, Sarah told me to write my legislators now. And, you can click another button. You can see pre-populated ways to send emails to these folks. So that's how you identify who those people are and to send them the message. So I talked about a bunch of messages. Who gets the message? Next slide, please. We're going to kind of sort of just wrap up here real quick, and then I'll talk about who delivers the message. Because it's so easy for everyone to take arts and culture for granted in our communities. And I always like to remind folks of what happened in Paris in 1911. And yeah, that's this picture right here. Bad news at the Louvre. The Mona Lisa was stolen. Took them 2 years to get it back. And those hooks are where the Mona Lisa had been hanging. In the 2 years the Mona Lisa was missing, more people went to see where the painting had been hanging than saw the painting itself in the previous 14 years. It's so easy for everyone to take arts and culture for granted. And so let's just go to that last slide. And just remember, when you're doing that, you're going to hear more about this. Build a relationship when you meet with that decision maker. Don't let your first meeting be your last. And a little bit more about who delivers the message. That third question, we had when they bring me up to Capitol Hill, I mean, they see me coming a mile away, right? Guys cover up their wallets, ladies lock their purse in the drawer. I mean, they know what I'm doing. But if I can bring a business leader, an artist, a military officer, someone to talk about how the arts touch their community or their work, it totally changes the conversation. We had the mayor of Mesa, Arizona on a panel a few years back, and he was telling a story of how it was budget hearing night for the arts. And so it was the mayor, the city council, all lined up. 60 people signed up to do 3 minutes about, arts support. But he said, I noticed that the chief of police was there that night, which wasn't unusual for a city council meeting, but he was in full chief of police regalia, hat, tie, medals, which was a little unusual. And after everyone else had testified, he asked for 3 minutes and got up and said, if you got to take a cut out of the arts budget, I'd rather you just took it out of my public safety budget. Because when they do their job well, it makes my job easier. Imagine if we had 1,000 police chiefs on that message, right? So who delivers the message? Build those relationships with all those decision makers in your community. Arts are a nonpartisan issue. Don't get all tied up in, this party or that party. Plenty of supporters on all sides. But I was saying, bring others along to the meeting. And then lastly, remember the golden rule, right? No numbers without a story, no stories without a number. And that's how you create a memorable advocacy experience. So I think the last one is just thank you. Last slide there, Jill, and that's my email at the bottom. And All right, I'll pass on to the next person.
Thanks so much, Randy. Love your energy. I've heard these points a few times, but it doesn't get old. You just make such
Thank
a
you.
compelling case for the art. So thank you. I'm glad we have you on our team. Next up, I'm going to introduce Robert Klaffky. Bob, again, you can read his full bio on our website, but as president of VanMeter Ashbrook Associates, Bob has directed the firm's legislative and executive agency lobbying and has also developed a successful practice in grassroots public affairs campaigns. His campaign experience spans more than 35 years and includes local, state, and federal elections, and we are very fortunate to have him as a principal lobbyist for Creative Ohio. Bob?
Thanks, Sarah. And I'm actually going to, maybe I will surprise you, I do actually believe anyone can lobby. You don't need a lobbyist. You shouldn't need a lobbyist. I always joke that we're like, criminal defense attorneys. You only hire one when you need one. So, there are some simple things that you can learn to do, but I love this phrase, Sarah, the culture of advocacy, because it is exactly what you need to do. You don't need to do this full time, but it does need to be integrated into everything you do. I'm going to review briefly these kind of 6, well, I'll call good practices, not necessarily best practices. There aren't any best practices, but just good ones and ones that we know that have worked in the past. And again, anyone can do it to enhance your impact on public policy or the legislative process. Broadly, I'm going to go through knowing the process, set priorities, inventory your assets, add to your stakeholders, expand your influence, and that specifically is locally. And know before you need. That's more about, you can't make instant friends. You need to know these people before you need to ask them for something. So let's start with knowing the process. That doesn't mean that you need to be a parliamentarian or that you need to know, you don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to know the revised code backwards and forwards, but you do need to know the basics of kind of how a bill becomes a law. You need to know the difference between an operating budget and a capital appropriations budget. And you need to kind of know the ebbs and flows of the legislative calendar. So, for example, in Ohio, we have a 2-year legislative session. That means that once they come into session in the odd numbered year in January, it is a continuous session for 2 years. We have a full-time legislature, which means bills can come and go and be voted on and acted on at any time during those 2 years until they adjourn at the end of the second year, which will be in late December typically. So right now, currently, we're in the second year of the 135th session of the Ohio General Assembly. The first year of the session is largely consumed by the biennial budget process. And that takes up the first 6 months. And when I say ebbs and flows, there are breaks. Yes, we have a full-time legislature, but there are breaks. So they typically break in the summer and they go home to their districts. Note that because that's a good time to meet with them. And then they come back in the fall for a short session, then they break for the holidays, and they come back in January of the odd numbered or the even numbered year where we are now. And then they'll go typically for 6 months again. So next week, for example, on the 26th, the last day of session scheduled until sometime after the November election. So they'll be gone all for the summer and most of the fall, primarily because this is the election year. So a lot of them are very preoccupied with their own elections. One of the other things you need to kind of understand when it comes to funding and with public funding, I've often run into this with nonprofits. Nonprofit professionals are accustomed to grant writing, and responding to requests from organizations that grant funds. In that process, the system is very merit-based. There are strict parameters, and you're writing a grant to meet those requirements. The legislative process is about advocacy. It's making a good argument. It can feel sometimes sort of arbitrary, but it's really not that much different than the other skills you use in your organization. It's similar to the way you work with your donors or your marketing out in the community. So don't think of, you got to kind of throw out all the rules you think of when you're asking for money when it comes to the legislature or from government. Now, I'm not saying, obviously, the Ohio Arts Council runs grant programs. But I'm saying at the legislative side, when they're appropriating the money for the Ohio Arts Council, that's where it is not like you're just, submitting an application for money. No, it's more about advocacy. You have to kind of make your case. Number two, setting priorities. In any advocacy effort, you've got to decide what is important. Focus on those things that have a material impact on your organization. And, kind of it's easy to think that everything the legislature is doing is important. It's not. First of all, most bills don't pass. There will be some, 2,000 bills introduced in any given General Assembly, and typically 300 are enacted, if that. This session, I think, will be under 100 at this point because they're moving very slowly. So devote your resources to things that matter, things that have a direct impact on you, and don't allow yourself or try to resist being distracted by every issue, and understand how you can allocate your time of what's important. 3, inventorying your assets. You probably already have a lot of tools in your own organization. Look around your board, your staff, your donors. You might have, I'm sure you would have, influential people in the community in your organization already. Now, just because they are on your board or they are a donor doesn't mean they necessarily would ever think to advocate for you. That's part of the education process, and you need to recruit them into your effort. Let them know what it is you're seeking in the legislature, whether it be funding or a policy issue. So educating them, figuring out that somebody is best friends with the chairman of the finance committee could be very valuable. And so bring them in for coffee, talk to them about what the organization has been doing. And again, this doesn't have to be, your board members hopefully know all these things, but sometimes it could just be a major donor or somebody just in the community who cares about what you do. So don't overlook them. 4, add to your stakeholders. And what I mean by this is, think of the legislators and local government as one of your stakeholders. Include them on your mailing list. Treat them like they are audience that you're trying to reach. Treat them like they are donors, subscribers, whatever it is. Treat them the same. Think of them in that same kind of capacity, and you start to nurture those relationships. Invite legislators to your organization, to your physical plant. If it's a theater, give them a backstage tour when the theater is dark and let them see how everything works, or when the theater has a show in it. Bring them to rehearsals if it's a symphony. Engage them to know what it's like and what you do and the impact you have in the community. And you need to, again, nurture that and have regular communications. Add them, I think I may have said this, but add them to your newsletter, add them to everything, invite them to events, when you have events. Also, expanding your influence is about expanding your influence locally. Don't forget those in your own communities who have influence, whether it be the chamber, business leaders, educators, could be, a juvenile court judge, somebody. There are people in your community that you wouldn't normally connect to your cause or your organization, but may care about it and may also have influence in the legislative process. So look for those kind of people and recruit them in as partners of yours to volunteer to help you when you need some help, and get to know them and make sure they know about you. The most important thing is don't assume everybody knows what you're doing. If you're not communicating that and engaging with the community, they may not. 6, know before you need. This is one of those things where, as I say, you don't make instant friends. So get to know your lawmakers before you need to ask them for something. This is, again, you do this year-round. This is a year-round occupation. If you have invited your legislator out to tour your facility, you have invited them to a donor reception, you have invited them to see a show or go backstage or do something at your, if you're an art museum, bring them into the, the behind the scenes of where the restoration work goes. Show them things that will interest them and they understand that the type of people you employ are highly educated and very professional and skilled folks in the community. And these are important jobs that you want to attract here. Those are the kinds of impressions you want to leave. And by getting to know them early and getting to know them and seeing them while they're back in the district, it really does help, because then when you're walking in later, when the budget's being considered and you're asking for an appropriation for the Ohio Arts Council, you don't have to explain who you are. You don't have to give them the background. They already know you. And you're more likely to get in to see them too, because they know you, because they've become familiar with you. So I urge you really to spend time getting to know legislators. Yes, some of them are going to be difficult. So, you might live in an area where your legislator just is, okay, I'm just going to say it, they might be a jerk. I don't know. But that's okay. You also shouldn't think of yourself as just your legislator where your facility is or where you live. Think of it as more of a regional, reach out. Don't think of just your legislator that, based on the district lines, because every community has a sense of community. And, whether you're in a rural area or a metropolitan area, there's going to be multiple legislators who all have some sort of their constituents certainly could be constituents of yours. You could share constituents just because you're not right within the district lines. Finally, we can move the slide, change the slide there. Some do's and don'ts. Start with the don'ts, because those are kind of easy. These are kind of things that should make sense to everybody, I'm sure, but good reminder. First of all, but before I even go into these, I'll also say that don't be afraid to call your legislator and ask for a meeting. Be patient. It could take a while, because sometimes, like they are right now, they're very busy. When they're in session, they have committee hearings to attend, and there's multiple committee hearings multiple committees that each member serves on. There could be votes taking place in those committees that they have to be at. Those committees, those meetings can pop up without much notice. So their schedules are very tight when they're in the State House. That's why I always suggest try to meet with them when they're back home. If you go to the July 4th parade and you see your legislator in a car going by and waving, after the parade, or if you see them walking around a festival, go introduce yourself. Tell them who you are. Say, I'd love to come in and see you sometime. I guarantee you 99% of the time, they will say, yes, absolutely, I want to see you. So when you do get your appointment, or you write a letter, or you communicate, however you use your communications, here are the don'ts. Obviously, don't insult your legislator. It doesn't work. Don't use form letters or postcards. I'm not a big fan of those. They're okay if it's something that needs to be done very quick and some organization has asked you to sign on, but it's much more powerful to handwrite a letter, frankly. They do read handwritten letters. It kind of stands out when it comes in the mail, when it's a handwritten letter. So don't hesitate to do that. Don't confuse the legislator. Make sure you know what you're asking for. If it's a piece of legislation, do you want a yes on the bill and a no on the amendment, or the other way around? Make sure you know specifically what you're talking about, the bill number, and the action you want them to take. So be very upfront. In fact, your first sentence should be, I'm writing to you today to ask you to vote no on Senate Bill, blah, 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 whatever it is. Make it very clear. Don't write a novel, keep it short. These are, again, common sense sort of things that you would think everybody should know, but it's a good reminder. The next slide is the do's, kind of the opposite of the others, right? It's do be polite and professional. Do be specific, ask for the vote. Like I said, you can handwrite something if you wish. Be short and to the point, and remind legislators, not in a threatening way, but just let them know that you're paying attention to his or her or their votes. I mean, it is something that, they care about. They know that oh crap, somebody's paying attention to this. They know what I'm doing. So it's important that you say that. And the way you say that is, I hope that we can count on you on this issue. It's that sort of, I don't mean a threatening, like I'm never gonna vote for you if you do this again, type of thing. That doesn't work, or it's not as effective. One final point, again, on the mass mailing things, kind of postcards or internet you get something on, you sign up on the web, you get an email and you respond to that. I'm not saying never do that again, because the volume can make up for the lack of personalization. So if there are thousands and thousands of postcards coming in or email messages, that can have an impact. But that's one of those things where you can't necessarily tell. So you might want to go ahead and fill out the postcard, the automated thing, but also write a letter too. Sometimes you don't have time though, because the vote might be tomorrow, and that's why you're getting those emails or text messages asking you to participate in something. So I'll probably leave it there now, and we certainly hopefully have time for questions if anybody has any, but we'll move on to the next section.
Thank you so much, Bob. Likewise, I am eternally grateful that Bob is on our team, my team, Creative Ohio's team, and on the side of the arts. And he's given us some great points to develop a strategy. And now we're going to hear of a very specific example of how that strategy can be deployed. So it's my pleasure to introduce next up Ed Gallagher. Ed is the Vice President of Education for the Beck Center for the Arts in Lakewood, Ohio. He founded the Beck Center's Creative Arts Therapies program 30 years ago. He is the Director of Operations for the All Ohio State Band and Youth Choir. He has served in leadership positions on numerous state boards, to include Creative Ohio's, and has been instrumental in developing the Beck Center's advocacy program, which he'll share with us today. Ed?
Thanks, Sarah. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And I love telling our story, because that's what the advocacy part is all about. So, all right, Jill, we'll start on the next slide, and here we go. So, in kind of designing and creating our own culture of advocacy, and kind of looking back and seeing where we've come, one of the goofiest things to me was when legislators would say, when you're done with your meeting, stay in touch. And I don't even call my family enough and fill them in on things. And I'm like, well, what am I going to send my state senator? What are we doing this weekend at the Beck Center? And as we've built this culture of advocacy and we've gotten more folks on our team involved, it's made that keeping them in touch a whole lot easier and a lot more natural. And it's made a huge difference for us when we make our visits. So I'll tell you from where we started to what we do now, and it's been pretty impactful. So we look at every opportunity to tell our story, whether it's elected officials in Columbus, whether it's our district folks here on the county level, or even in our city level as well. And we do our best to include those folks whenever we convene anybody in the community. So we let them know what's happening, because it's a chance for them to come to see us without us coming to ask for something, but it allows them to come to Beck Center or one of our events out in the community and be in the mix with their constituents and folks from the community taking part. So we've tried to come up with all those natural ways besides it just having to be a meeting in their office somewhere when they're back in the district. So we invite them over. So we have a community engagement committee as part of our board structure here at Beck Center. We have elected officials of all types, city council, statewide as well. We have arts advocacy organizations as part of that committee, folks that are in community development corporations, parents groups, and a few others that take part in that. And we, during our quarterly meetings with our engagement committee, we make sure that every one of those folks gets a couple of minutes to give their update. Sometimes it's arts related and very impactful along what we do on a daily basis. Other times it is just their legislation that they're working on or one of their hot topics that they're working on. And it's also explaining what's taking place in whatever body they're part of. And that we have found has been helpful to everybody sitting at the table, whether they're elected officials or those community organizations as well. And it's a great way for us to be a leader in the community that way. We've done tours and in-person updates. As Bob mentioned, summer is a great time to do that. We do it, sometimes come see a show, but we're also aware of what folks may consider their gifts and all the rules that they have to follow. So have them come and experience what it looks like when the building is chock full of kids on a summer day and see what the impact we're making. The other thing we've learned to be keenly aware of as well is if we invite a representative who's from a different district into our place, We often let our district reps know that that other person is going to be here at our place, just so they're aware that someone's there. And it's also a good time for them to maybe connect. And since we have a good relationship with our folks, it just helps build and continues that momentum for all of us. And then, of course, we make a visit. We've made more than enough visits. Never enough, right? We made a good number of visits to our city council. Recently got to be part of county council as we work on our excise tax here in Cuyahoga County, and of course our state level. And then I guess the other thing too is make sure that you're willing to be that arts voice when anyone calls on you to be that person or that organization to be called on. All right, next one, Jill. So our State House Advocacy Day has been very impactful. We've been doing it since about 2015, and it actually was one of Sarah's predecessors in the organization that gave us the first model to what we've worked on and what we've created over the years. Key to that day has been board volunteers and parents. I think staff, everybody expects your staff to be there. We want our jobs. We know that we're making the impact and those kind of things. The biggest feedback we've gotten has been when the board, volunteers, and parents show up in Columbus in the State House, because what we constantly hear is, wow, you took a day off and you came down here. For a volunteer or a parent, it's even a bigger wow, because they don't have that board duty. So it's even one more removed of like, all right, so you serve as an usher at Beck, you give your time on the weekends, and you just took a day off, and you drove to Columbus, and now you're going to tell me your story. So including those folks has been far more impactful than the staff being there. We look at the staff as being the one to kind of hold it all together when we get to have those meetings, and maybe be the one to parcel out who's talking at one point. But the board, volunteer, parents, total huge impact. The other thing that we've changed or taken a different approach to is we don't make our visits ever during any of the annual arts days that Ohio Arts Council has done in the past, or with any other arts related event. We want to go be in Columbus, and when we make that visit, we're there just for us, and we want folks to know that we're making that special time to be with them and to make that impact that way. And then, of course, too, we stand out a little bit more, to be honest, because we're not just one of 40 other arts organizations coming through. Those days definitely have their benefits, but we feel that we can be part of that with a few of our staff and then take our delegation down on other days. And of course, our approach is different based on whether it's the budget year or the capital budget year. Of course, during the annual budget trips, it gives us a chance to say, or biannual budget trips, we get to thank everyone for their support previously for our capital requests, for the arts in Ohio, for OAC, for all sorts of things that impact the creative industries. And of course, when we go for the capital budget year, we're going to do some of those same things, but it's going to be a much more pointed discussion. And that's really like, we're not leaving the office till we get in that ask capital budget wise. And as Bob was saying too before, that makes that ask a whole lot easier if we've already made a couple of trips over the previous years to keep saying thank you. We acknowledge what you're doing to support us, and what else can we do there. All right, so in prepping for our day, which is the next slide, let's see, I get out of order. Types of events. Oh, Carrie, sorry. Lark, you're right. That was right, Jill. I have my own notes in front of me and got ahead of myself. And she's so excited. So, types of events. We've done large gatherings. So we have used some of the office spaces, I think it's like 13th, 14th floor or so of Rife Tower, where we did an elected officials and staff lunch. We did presentations, then we did visits, and we also had some meetings with the state arts organizations. The large gatherings were great because, so I'll tell you the good and the bad on both of these. It was great because we were able to do a large-scale presentation to folks that attended. We were able to bring some of our own patrons down. One of my former clients in music therapy came and spoke about the impact of Beck on her life and what the difference made for her. And to have her read that to a room full of legislators and their staff was hugely, hugely impactful. The challenge we had with that was it was costly because we had to do meals. We spent a lot of time tracking down RSVPs. We also found early on, and we fixed our ways the second time, we found early on all the folks that were there were also glad to gather and eat lunch and talk to each other. So we did open seating, and we kind of reflected after and found that like some of our own staff were aced out of some of the conversations because all the aides all sat together because they finally got to like be in the same room and gather. So the next year we did all assigned seating, of which most people followed the spirit of that. And then we put staff and volunteers at each one of the tables to be able to have that conversation. We let them do their thing, but then we also made sure that we put our points in there as well. When we've done the smaller visits, we've done just a prep ahead of time, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Then we've just gone off and done our office visits in small groups, and again, I'll get to that in a moment. The key on both of these have been the prep time before we either had the elected officials in or we made our visits, where we talked about what the day was going to look like and reiterated all those talking points. We also the value we have of being 2 hours away is carpooling, and they all talked about those points for 2 hours before they got there. But one of the keys has been having visitors come speak from this other state arts organization. So Sarah joined us this year to come in and give her viewpoints on Creative Ohio, the industry, or the creative industries, what was happening in the given time, in that slice in time at the Statehouse. We've had folks from Ohio Arts Council come every year and talk. We've also gone to OAC's office and chatted with them, which was hugely impactful to our board members to see that space. And then the last, there's a whole list there of, we wanted folks not to just go down, drive to the Statehouse, walk through the underground garage and go have those meetings. So we've had presentations at Rife Gallery. We've gone to the Senate and House sessions and been introduced from the floor, which, for those that have been introduced before, you've done that a lot of times. For the new folks, that is just the cool factor like you wouldn't believe. And it increased their willingness to get out and tell the story. And then I always give a plug for my favorite store in the state is the Statehouse Gift Shop. We actually even took everyone there shopping. Again, part of the whole experience of being in the Statehouse. Okay, so prepping for the day. My goal is that when our advocates go down, they're just there to advocate. We don't want them to worry about how to get anywhere, what the schedule is. We don't want them to worry about getting lost. I want to hold their hand through the whole process so that they can have fun and feel the experience of the day and focus on just telling our story, which causes a whole bunch of work ahead of time, but the payoff is so much worth it, especially if you enjoy all the free stuff. So over the years, we've worked with our state senator and state representative. So I have to say, Senator Antonio and her staff have been hugely helpful to us, helping us reserve rooms either at Rife Tower or most recently a small room off of the map room in the Statehouse to have a home base there instead of the benches outside the Statehouse Museum. Again, added to, I think, the impact that some of our advocates could make because they felt like they were really digging into the Statehouse. When we work on our schedule, only one of our staff members sends email requests to set up the schedule so that there's not multiple hands in it. After that, we pass it off to one other person to make all those of those phone calls for all the folks that we don't hear back from, and we get as successful as possible there. But getting into emails first and phone calls is much better than when we started years ago when we had to call every office that we went to. We worked on strategic choice of who's going to make the visits. We didn't want to put 3 talkers all together to go have the visit. We didn't want 3 new people to go make that visit. We definitely put our more seasoned advocates. We put our president and CEO and our board chair are definitely the 2 that are always going to go meet Senator Dolan. They're the ones that are going to go meet Jay Edwards when we're talking budget. So those are the folks that we're going to put out there so that they have the most knowledge. I can answer those questions, plus those are the key folks that we want them to build that relationship with. And most of the time those have worked well. Sometimes the staff person is the ringmaster of the talking, and sometimes it's been some of our board folks who are very stoked for the day. We're also aware of travel time and prepping for the meeting, of who can get where, age and ability, and focus of our advocates to make sure that they can get from point A to point B. We've tried to keep people all in Rife or all in the State House, so they're not going back and forth and going through all of those kind of things. We provide all the materials to everyone ahead of time. And also, just in terms of lunch, we order that from some of the approved providers from the State House, of which several of them have some amazing social action interest levels as well. And that also adds to the day to take our story just a little bit more of the impact that we're trying to make. Okay, materials. So all the information that we send to everyone, I will blow through this as quickly as possible because you all get what needs to go there. But on the schedule, we have a whole spreadsheet of elected official, their location, staff contact, office number, who we're supposed to meet with, so no one gets up there and says, I don't know, we're meeting with Senator Jones. We want them to have everybody's name. And we also make sure we know, if we know ahead of time, if the representative is going to be there or if it's just going to be an aide, so everyone's prepped of what they're walking into. Also on our list, we even let everyone know who we're still waiting to hear from, because we still get calls that morning. And it also lets our folks know if their elected official has one that's been responsive to us or not. And we've had some elected folks that weren't responsive, that their person who was part of our advocacy team reached out after and said, I live in your district, and like, we really wanted to connect with you. One of the things we added this year was a step-by-step personal guide to and from each meeting. So we literally wrote out each person, when you leave this office, you're going to go over to Rife Tower, and outside the elevators, you're going to meet the two other people from our advocacy team at the chairs right outside the elevators. Again, it was a huge amount of work to make it work, but we had folks say that they didn't get lost at all, and they knew to sit by those chairs and wait for Bill to come show up and go to the next meeting, which again got them more prep for that. One of the things that seems to have been one of the most important things that we have done over the years is we provide elected officials info. It's all there on the House and Senate websites, all their bios, but we included their bios and their pictures, so you know who you're talking to when you walk in. And if you ride those elevators and walk around the halls there, you might run into that person before you even get there and be able to say, oh, we're going to see you in 10 minutes. Those are those kind of things that were helpful. We also highlight information about each of the elected officials. Family, what are their interests? Are they a policy person? Are they an arts person already? Are they into photography? What awards have they won? Are they into social service? We tell more of our music therapy history, or we know that they're theater buffs, so we can talk more on the theater end of things. So we'll highlight that. And I will say here, we also make sure that our advocates don't leave that out or laying around, so they know the intel that we have, and not leave those highlighted things there. Again, it's a given, but it's always worth reminding folks. We also provide patron info from each of the districts, and we also provide a zip code list for everyone. We provide talking points, and as you can imagine, it's a long list, but we make sure that our advocates know to thank them for the exact dollar amounts that we got last time, what it went for, how it's been impactful. We give them a Beck Center update that may or may not be related to our capital request, give them a copy of the request, and then we also have prompts for our folks so that they say, I'm glad I'm a member of the board because, I'm glad I'm a volunteer because, and not just have to tell someone else's story but their own. And we always leave various pieces of collateral from Americans for the Arts, Creative Ohio, OAC, and then from our local folks, whether it be Assembly for the Arts or Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. We make sure that we provide those bits of information as well, because we're not doing this alone. And then the last part there, and you can read those later, this is the packet that we leave with everybody so that they know how to get in touch with us, including pens and cards from our president and CEO. So next one on our day. we're exhausted. We even got to the day yet. So we start our day by 9 o'clock. We all gather real quick, go through all the hard copies of things that were mailed. I'll tell you one of the things we're going to change in a moment, because we never get everyone there by 9 o'clock. It just doesn't happen. Changes in the schedule, which happen overnight. Review each of the packets. We label everything for each of the elected officials. So people, if they end up at the end of the day still have Senator Antonio's packet with them, we know that we got to take it back to her office, and we knew that's the one that was forgotten. For staffing that day, one of the things we found most important is 1 or 2 of us from the Beck Center staff, who are the main contact with all the offices, have minimal meetings. So I logged lots of great steps back and forth between the 2 buildings, because I was the hand holder, and one of my other colleagues was a hand holder as she's learning the whole process as well. We wanted, again, them to be able to get to everything without having to figure any of those spaces out. So while I might be super helpful in one of the meetings or more of the meetings, we felt it's more important for myself and my colleague Kelsey to be able to give some of those tours and be able to lead people through those spaces and help them out to ask those questions. Then as we convene back in the space, whether it be for lunch or at the end of the day, we have someone take notes, track action steps, what are responses, what are questions people came up with, so that we were best prepared. So, and then next slide, which is our last one. After our visit, we do, staff does the handwritten follow-ups. We've tried it having the advocates do it, and it took us too long to get the note cards to them and the addresses and all that came with it. So we were able to put those together much quicker. We provide the info and answers to questions to elected officials or staff within like the next 48 hours or so. And Sarah, I have to say, you modeled that behavior so well for us, because we asked you when you came to the session a whole host of questions, and I think it was less than 24 hours. We got all sorts of answers that we were then able to give to our own folks, which again gets them to be able to be better advocates. We make sure that we follow through on events and performance invitations as we've promised. One of the things we're going to do next year is do a Zoom call 2 to 3 days before the event, because there's always so many folks that seem to come late, that we could have a calm, measured discussion about what we're going to anticipate. And then that day, again, we'll make it even easier. They just have to figure out where they're going to park and get into our space. In the morning's always such a challenge. So this model has definitely served us very, very well. I don't see us ever stopping doing it. Only 1 year in the last 10 or so that we didn't go. We got the one in right before the pandemic, so that was great. The 1 year we decided not to go to Columbus, and we did a local meeting here at Beck Center where it was more of our local folks. And that was very beneficial, but I think making sure we stay aware of what's happening in the State House and present there will help us out. So there's our thoughts. I'd be happy to chat with anybody anywhere along the way to share this, because it's made a big difference for us. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Ed. Amazing. I know for anybody like me who really appreciates logistics, you were so impressed as you rattled through how this is done, but I can tell you actually watching it in practice, I was blown away by the level of detail. And I know it took a tremendous amount of effort and time that Ed and the rest of the staff of Beck put into this, but it really was impactful even to watch it like adjacently. I was able to join them for lunch. So I believe this is a model that can really work for a lot of organizations of similar size. And I know Ed would absolutely be willing to help share some additional details. Again, we'll have his slides as a part of our follow-up to all of you as attendees. And so I hope to see some other organizations take a cue from the Beck Center. So at this point, if we have any questions from the group, I'm going to quickly check the chat. You can put them in the chat, or I think we're a small enough group that if you'd just like to unmute and share a question for any of our 3 panelists, I think that would be okay as well. And I know I have a couple of questions, actually. Bob, did you want to chime in?
I think Kim.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Kim, go ahead. Thanks. You're being so polite with your hand up.
Hi, thank you. This has been very inspiring. I've been scribbling notes just just ferociously. So we are a small nonprofit in Worthington, Ohio. We have a wonderful relationship with our city council, and our city council, our city is what gives us a quarter of our operating budget. A year from now, I'll feel even better about that. And then I would like to start advocating at the next level. I don't even know where to start. And any suggestions of, where do I just even start? I think I should come attend an advocacy day at the State House, which I've never done before. What else would you suggest?
I think I think the one thing that's helped us here and in some of the work that we've done in our music therapy work, been involved, we received licensure this last year, and that was like a 15-year bit of advocacy. And we kind of changed the advocacy definition to anyone that we can tell our story to that can help us in any way, shape, or form to meet our mission in a better way. So if it's Senator fill in the blank, great. If it's council person, whoever, that's great. But if it's, three key leaders, I don't know if it was, Randy was talking about, in the sheriff in Arizona, get to know whoever that person might be to advocate for you. I know you have some great youth programs there at McConnell. And so is there a local judge in the penal system that's serving youth that might be an advocate for bringing arts into a jail situation or in preventative measures, and get to know them? Because they have a whole number of folks in their sphere of influence as well. So that's where I would start. Anyone that'll listen that's really interested, that's going to be a great place. And then it just keeps going out from there. It's the rock and the pebble in the pond thing.
Bob, would you have anything to tack onto that, and sort of as you're transitioning from local level advocacy to maybe for the first time really engaging at the State House, where you would start in that process?
Yeah, I mean, I literally was just looking at my phone trying to look at the district map, who's Worthington represented by. I have to do it on a computer because it's too small on my phone. Yes, I mean, start with your House member and your Senate member and work out from there. Now, these districts have recently changed, and so it's going to get confusing, and they may change again after the next election. So, and also, by the way, I know our email contact information is in here. Please feel free to call me. If you have a question, I work for the organization. I can direct you. Done that a lot. Sarah will send people to me or set up calls for advice on something, and we can kind of help you from there. But I would just start with your local elected officials, and then work out from there. Because you're right here near the Capitol, it's a lot easier for you because you can get down to the State House and meet people. But start with the ones who represent you and move out. Because you're in a metropolitan area, you have a lot more leeway in kind of moving around and fighting other legislators too. Kind of get to know all the Central Ohio legislators, what I would say.
Thanks, Bob. Ed, a question. Oh, actually, Dory, I know that you had your hand up.
I did. I'm sorry. I got interrupted
Yeah, that's okay.
in the middle of all that. So I'm sorry. I had a little scramble there, but my question is for Ed actually. And I think I saw it pop up at the bottom too. Same question. As I'm also a logistics person, so all that was very fascinating and interesting to me. I've done that on a much smaller level, actually on Arts Advocacy Day. So I'm very intrigued by the idea that you don't do it on the day that everybody else is there. So that's interesting. But my question was, how many staff members do you have, and how many advocates do you have running around on these days that you do this at the State House and at in the representative's office?
I think this last one we had 12 or 13 folks. I think it's about where we were. 15 would have been top. So I want to say it was 12 to 13, somewhere in that range. And then staffers, there's myself and one of my colleagues who is our community engagement manager, and then Cindy Einhaus, who's our president and CEO. We're pretty much the three that put it all together. And it's mostly myself and one of my colleagues that do all the phone calls and lay it all out. Cindy handles all the talking points and works with some of the board to make sure that we're all on the same page that way. So it's basically one or two of us that doing the big format of the whole day, and Cindy coming in to do all those great president and CEO tying it all together sort of things.
Okay, great. So a lot of Excel spreadsheets. That's what I had. So
Yes.
yeah.
We probably spend about 2 months, you know, in the ebb and flow. So there's, of course, there's those weeks that we don't do a thing, and then there's the other weeks, you know, the 2 to 3 weeks out when you start panicking. So that's when you put a lot more work in. That's my work model. So
I have a question for Ed. Ed, how do you select your targets for your meetings?
sure. In the budget year meetings, we've tried to pick a wide swath of folks from Beck Center on out that have a good number of their constituents are patrons at Beck Center, whether they're coming to shows or enrolled in classes. So we've taken a bigger swath there and trying to get more of the region. When it comes to the capital budget, again, it's a tighter circle of the folks right around us. But then we've also reached out to the top 2 or 3 leads on finance in the House and the Senate. You know, we're lucky that Senator Dolan, his district butts up to where we are here in Lakewood, and then Senator Antonio, who's, you know, the lead minority in the Senate, is our representative. So we already have some of those folks that are on our doorstep. But when it comes to the capital budget, we've reached other places throughout the state to go introduce ourselves to those key folks that are listed on especially in the finance committee. Mm-hmm.
I think that's smart. Yep. That's very
Excellent question.
Capital goal. Because you know, what happens is your member that is your advocate in submitting the request, that's great, but they may not be in the room making the decision. So you want to be making sure other people who you believe will be in the room, like the chairs of committees and, you know, people like that, or also have some education on it.
And I'll throw in one thing too of how important the meetings are. But again, one of Sarah's predecessors and Bob came to our meeting in 2020 as we were going for the capital budget. And that half an hour in the morning before we went and made the visits was hugely impactful, because that was the so-called boots on the ground game changer. So Bob, you gave us so much information in that little bit of time, but it didn't overwhelm anyone, but it allowed us to tweak our message a little bit and say, okay, we better not say this and we better emphasize this more. So again, that helps prep for all those different meetings we go to.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed. Any other questions for our panelists?
Just saw one in the chat about asking how often the Ohio information is updated. So I talked about just 2 studies today. You know, there was a Dayton region, also, you know, Cuyahoga County, and that was arts and economic prosperity. Cuyahoga County is over $500 million. The multi-county region of Dayton is about 300 million. We do that study every 5 years. So I talked about that one. The second one I talked about was the Arts and Cultural Production Satellite Account. That's the Bureau of Economic Analysis. I shared the $25 billion, which is 2022 data. They do that every year. So it's annual. Usually comes out spring, you know, kind of April-ish or something like that.
I know if you're following releases and newsletters from AFTA, you'll get information when those numbers are released. Also, Creative Ohio, when they came out this year, we made sure that we included that in our monthly newsletter. So we'll try to keep you up to date as the new numbers are released. Okay, well, I want to wrap things up by thanking each one of our panelists so much for their time and expertise today. Again, remember, and to all of our attendees, you're going to receive a link to all of this information. Also, we have contact information up on the screen right now for each one of our panelists and myself. I really want to underscore this. This is our job at Creative Ohio, to help guide you through this process. Please feel free to reach out to me personally if you have specific questions for our lobbyists, for Bob. If you would like at least an initial consultation with Bob, please, again, reach out to me or Bob directly. We're happy to help you with that. And I know that if you feel that this information presented would be helpful to your board, to your staff, I would be happy to come and schedule either an in-person or a virtual presentation of some of this information as well for your organization. So thank you for your attendance. Again, if you're not a member, please consider joining us through our website, creativeoh.org. And thanks so much to each one of you for spending some of your afternoon with us. Take care.